Hello, everyone. It's a few minutes past 8 o'clock. I want to welcome you all here to Mental Health While Black Part 2. My name is Robin Saunders. We have a few panelists here to speak with you today. And many of you could be somewhere else at this point in time tonight. You could be doing something else, listening to something else, watching something else, but we're glad you're here with us tonight. So let's start off first with the introduction from Mayor Marty Walsh, and then we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Mayor Marty Walsh, and I want to thank Toy Burton and DeeDee's Cry for the incredible work they do in the Boston community all year long. And I want to thank all of them for organizing this event today. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and seeking and accepting help is a sign of strength. That's especially true right now. The pandemic has added a whole new set of challenges to everyday life. For people who were struggling before, it can even be harder to manage this added weight. I'm here to tell you it's okay to feel fear and anxiety. We'll feel that for some time. This is an important time to take care of yourself. We're all handling this the best we can. And the only thing we can do is take one day at a time. If you need someone to talk to, you have options. You can call your healthcare provider to get set up with a telehealth counselor. Or you can call 311 at the city, our hotline, to get connected to anonymous counseling over the phone. I know that DeeDee's Cry is going to share some important resources with you today. I want to thank the panelists for coming together and sharing their stories. In times like these, it's important to support one another and find ways to connect. I wish you all the very best, and I thank you for creating a positive change in our community. Hi, I'm Mayor Marty Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you to the Mayor, Marty Walsh there. And before we start with our panelists tonight, I also want to thank those that made tonight possible. We have a sponsor, Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. Thank you. Thank you also going out to the Eastern Bank, who supports DeeDee's Cry. Thank you going out to Callaway Graphics. They created the wonderful flyer. And also, if you get a chance, later on tonight or tomorrow or whenever you think about it, if you could support DeeDee's Cry, that would be appreciated. You can do that through a donation. You can look on GoFundMe and look up DeeDee's Cry and put in any amount that you'd like. As well, you could mail a check into Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. And the address for the Louis D. Brown is 2 John Eliot Square, Unit 2C, Roxbury, Mass. 02119. Now, as we continue tonight, I'll just give you an idea of how we're going to work tonight's program. We have 5 panelists that you probably see on your screen. And I must say, today is the part 2, third time we're doing Mental Health While Black, but first time doing it virtually. So there might be some technical flaws here and there. You might see our eyes wandering around because it's hard to figure out where to look, but we're here with you in spirit and we're live. I hear we're live on Facebook. So if you'd like to send out information to folks that you know are around that might want to hear these stories, let them know. Tune in on Facebook now with us. So right now, let me introduce, we have 5 folks that want to talk to you and share their stories. We have, as you see on the screen, we have Jimmy W. Hills. We have Dr. Brandy Brooks. We have Neisha Deed. Oh yeah. And also we have Carlos Henriquez. So as we start off, we're going to, let me first introduce to you Dr. Brandy, Toy Burton.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Toy Burton, and I am the founder and executive director of DeeDee's Cry. DeeDee's Cry is named after my sister, Denita Shayne Morris, who died by suicide when she was 23 in 1986. But I started DeeDee's Cry in 2017 after I noticed organizations whose focus is on mental health and suicide prevention really didn't do things in communities of color. So DeeDee's Cry is about making sure that resources about mental health and suicide prevention are accessible to communities of color, and we elevate the conversation of mental health. And next will be Dr. Brandy Brooks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brandy Brooks, and I'm going to serve in the role as a moderator of sorts this evening. Before I get started, I would first like to start with a few disclaimers. Even though the impact of suicide, of depression, of mental health challenges impacts communities differently, one of the things we are going to debunk this evening and discuss over and over and over again is that it does happen in our community. This is an issue and a topic we have to talk about. And so, with that being said, one of the things I want to acknowledge is that some of you that may be listening at home or watching us right now live on Facebook, please know that if you have been personally or professionally impacted by this topic, please make sure to take care of yourself as we go along. Some of the things we discuss may hit a little close to home for you. It may personally impact you. And so you may need to pause, get up, take a breath, and then come back and join us. Because always, always, always remember, the first order of business is taking care of yourself as we have these conversations. So beware of your responses to the speakers. Beware of how you're reacting to some of the situations you hear about or some of the things that you hear. Take a break. Take time to breathe. Always check in with yourself. Okay? And so tonight is about education and opening up the conversation and in hearing from other panelists about their stories and sharing resources. However, we are not clinicians. If you find yourself needing additional resources, we will provide some, but make sure you reach out, okay? So I always like to start when I'm doing these talks with a little bit of an analogy, if you will. So imagine you have a cup, and in that cup is the legal liquid of your choice, and you're thirsty. You are parched. But before you can take a sip, you have to pour out a little for every one of the stressors in your life. So every one of the things that you see as roadblocks, every one of the things that keep you up at night, every one of those things that you are fearful of and you are stressed about. And so you begin to pour a little bit out of this cup every time you think of one of those things. So your bills are mounting up. You pour a little bit out. I can't pay my rent this month. You pour a little bit out. I received that stimulus check, but it didn't stimulate my bank account. You pour a little bit out. Your immigration status is up in the air and your court case has been postponed. Pour a little bit more out. You are fearful and worried because the country's opening up now and you're concerned about your health and the health of your loved ones. Pour a little more out. Now, you're sitting here and you've been at home for a month, 2 months, and you're working from home and you're homeschooling your 3 kids. You're their teacher, their therapist, their chef, and everything else. And you are at your wits' end. Thank God for teachers. Thank God for school counselors. Pour a little bit out of your cup. So at this point, by the time that you want to take a sip from your cup, you are literally and figuratively empty. Your cup has nothing left in it, right? From the traumas, from the stressors, from all those things that are going on in your life. You're an emergency service worker right now, and you have to be at work, and you're stressed about that. You pour a little bit out. And so you're sitting there and you're thinking and you're wondering, and you can't quench your own thirst. And so, what the conversation we are having tonight and we are talking about are those moments where you find yourself needing that drink. You need something to fill your soul, fill your spirit, but you don't have it. And so when we have these conversations tonight, when we're talking about mental health while Black, I want to also remind everyone that is listening and watching, having a conversation about mental health while Black is also about having a conversation about financial health while Black. It's also a conversation about your physical health while Black. It's also a conversation about your spiritual health while Black. It's also a conversation about structural racism and discrimination while Black. It is not just one thing. When we think about that cup and all the stressors, it's not just one thing. Tonight's conversation is about the whole. While we're going to focus on the mental, keep in mind it is about every part of you being important when you are trying to find hope and healing. So, with that being said, because I could go on about, some of the statistics and some of the other things that we see when we are talking about mental health while Black, what I'd rather do is really start to hear from our panelists and really start to hear stories being shared about how we individually and how we collectively tackle this issue. And so first, I'll turn it over to Neisha. Neisha, if you will, please introduce yourself and share your beautiful story.
Good evening. Good evening. This is so interesting doing it this way. This is my third time being a part of this. And every time I always enjoy speaking and also hearing, the questions that come afterwards, because they're always just so interesting when other people feel like they can also share their stories too. As Dr. Brandy mentioned, my name is Neisha Deed. I am the founder of an organization called Pure Spark. And I also am a speaker. So I do things like this very often, just sharing my story. And my journey with being a mental health advocate and activist really started about almost a year ago. I think my anniversary just passed, but it was when I lost my fourth family member to suicide. And that had happened, and I had just gotten so frustrated, so angry because, no one was talking about mental health in my family, although we knew that it was obviously evident, right? And I said to some friends, I was like, you know what? Enough is enough. Like, I'm going to come out with my story. I'm going to share my story because if for anything, I hope that me sharing my story can help another family member. And it definitely has, thank God. But beyond that, help other people, not just in my family. So mental health, I got introduced to mental health at a very young age when I lost my uncle. I think I was around like 10 years old. I lost my uncle to suicide. And at that point in time, I just thought, it was a remote situation. Like, he was the quiet uncle, extremely smart, but it was a remote situation. So, we mourned his death and we kind of moved on. And, then I started seeing it appear again and again. And I was like, well, maybe this isn't so remote, right? And then it hit me. And then I had my own personal bout with mental illness, specifically depression. So the way that I grew up, I was focused a lot on the financial piece, like Dr. Brandy was talking about all those quadrants of our lives, the self-care wheel, right? Emotional, mental, spiritual. I was focused on financial. That was it. I was focused on making sure that I can make it out the hood, that I can, buy a home, that, um, and that's kind of what I did. I went to Howard, I studied in accounting because I knew that, I would make some good money. And I went on to making six figures and all that, but I wasn't happy, right? Like I realized at that point in time that money wasn't everything. And especially living in a capitalistic society where we're always forced and thought to believe that, if you have money, money equals happiness. And I found that not to be true. Yes, you do need money to survive, but if you're working 50, 60 hours a week and you're not able to spend time with your family, you're not able to spend time with your friends, and more importantly, not able to spend time with yourself, that can be very draining. And I think I was always under the impression that I had to be the strong Black woman, right? Like, if I said I couldn't do something, then that was a sign of weakness. But I eventually learned that not to be true. But I had a wake up call. I always talk about the warning signs and the warning signs that I missed, and I'll list out the ones that were true to me, and this may or may not be relevant to you or relevant to what what you have going on. But mental health is personal, but this can help you figure things out. So I realized that I wasn't sleeping. Probably was getting like 1 hour sleep per night. So I was an insomniac for about a whole entire year. Yeah, it was pretty bad. I could hardly eat. So I had both depression and anxiety. So the anxiety made it hard for me to eat. And the depression made it hard for me to sleep, or both, who knows. And I was isolating. My friends would reach out to me. They want to call me. They want to talk. They want to come over. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to see anybody. So isolation, coupled with, hardly eating, hardly sleeping, I kept going at work, right? Because that's what we're taught to do. We're taught to just keep going. We're machines, work, work, work. That's all that matters. Climb that corporate ladder, until I could hardly grasp the ladder at all. I fell off. I completely fell off the ladder. And, one day in my house, just hopeless, lost all hope, felt like a burden to everybody. I wrote a note to my family saying, this is my account. This is where all the money is. You won't have to worry about anything. I'm out of here. I can't do this no more. If this is what life is about, I don't want to be here. I really don't. It was a very, very dark place. And thank God for my family, who was constantly, in my corner and constantly around. I was living in DC at the time, and they lived in Boston, in the Boston area. They would constantly call me every day. And that one day that I didn't pick up my phone, my family knew something was up. And that's when the police came. They knocked on my door, and yeah, they were like, "You're coming with us. You're not okay." And although I tried to appear okay, because that's what I was always used to doing, there was evidence that showed them that no, you're not. So you're coming with us, and we're going to take you to the hospital so that you can get better. We're here to help you. And that journey took a while. It took a complete year for me to kind of like come to, and come back to myself. But then when I did come back to myself, there was things that I had to relearn about life. That is not all about work. All work and no play is not good. I had to learn how to like forgive myself for the guilt that I had for not being able to show up to work and do the work, and because I was ill. So, those are things that I'm still learning about myself. Healing is a lifelong journey. But I just wanted to share with you guys, like, sometimes your stories don't have to necessarily be so quote unquote traumatizing in a sense, like, you know, with murders and this and that and the third. I thought I was doing everything right, you know, but I had to relearn some things, and that's okay. Like, I'm better for it now, you know, I'm much better for it now. So thank you so much for allowing me to spend, I think I went over 10 minutes, I'm sorry, this time sharing my story with you guys.
So I want to thank Neisha and for sharing her story, because there are so many things that we can learn from her story and from her experience. One of the things I'm reminded of is this Oprah Winfrey quote that says, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." And what we hear from Neisha's story is that she was wounded for years trying to chase this dream, trying to chase these dollars, you know, not sleeping, not eating, you know, not really connecting with what her passion is. And so it came to a point that her wounds, whether visible or invisible for the naked eye, became too much, right? And in certain respects, like, we all have wounds, right? We all have those things that um, we carry with us. Again, some more visible than others. So think about what you do when you have a visible wound for just a second. So some wounds are superficial, you know, they are boo boos, if you will. You kiss them, you feel better, right? It's all better. Ooh, you get up, walk it off. Other wounds are a little deeper and they break the skin. Like, you know, you have to use some peroxide, some alcohol. You may even put a band-aid on it, right? And then you have other wounds still where you can't just put a band-aid on it. You may have to go to the doctor. You may have to get medication. And sometimes you may even have to get surgery and then have physical therapy. And so think about this. If you have mental wounds that you never address, what does that do to you physically, financially, spiritually? Think about holding that. Think about walking around with that. Neisha just said she literally was not sleeping for a year, would sleep an hour. And so she wasn't allowing herself to heal the way she needed to heal. And that is hard to carry day after day, year after year. You know, my mom has a saying. She says, "A hit dog will holler." And for those that don't understand, like, Southern colloquialisms, what it means is that when we're injured financially, physically, mentally, we have a wound. And some of us holler, some of us, you know, cower in the corner, some of us go within ourselves, and others of us may become angry and lash out to others, right? And so, what we really have to understand in this conversation through Neisha's story and some of the others that we'll hear is that when you are hurting and when you are in pain, when you have a wound, it has to be addressed, because if it doesn't, it'll just fester. And you may literally and figuratively become infected by that. And for Neisha, you know, she talks about her breaking point. But thank goodness, you know, for Neisha, her family, and I feel the collective community we have, that she's still here, that her family was able to see her wounds. Even if she didn't want them to, they saw something that said, she needs help, she needs support, and we need to have a mental health check done on Neisha. And so I'm reminded often when we have these conversations, particularly when we talk about mental health, we often think it's an individual, but it really does take a collective. You know, kind of like the African proverb, it says, you know, if you want to go somewhere quickly, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, go together. And we need each other when we are having these conversations. We need to explore the stories. We need to hear these stories. And so, with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Robin for a second, see if there are any questions or comments or anything that comes in, and then we'll segue on to Carlos and hear his story.
Okay, thank you so much. And now, new on this technical platform, wanted to shout out to Jimmy, who's handling all the magic back there. It has nothing to do with me. Christian just wanted to thank me. Thank Jimmy. And if anyone does have any questions of our panelists, we're not going to call them panelists anymore. These are our friends. These are our family members. These are our neighbors. These are cousins, brothers, sisters, mothers, aunts, uncles. They're here. We're here. We're here together. And without being together, we can't help each other. So that's why we're here tonight. Again, I want to say that you could have been elsewhere, although I know you're in your house, but you could have been somewhere else. You could have been cooking something and putting it on your Facebook. You could have been taking a picture while you're painting your toenails, or you could have been watching Barack Obama, but you're here with us. So thank you. Thank you. We're all going to check out Barack later. I know that. But we're here tonight, so thank you again. Let me just quickly say thank you to the sponsors, because without the sponsors, this does not happen. Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, the Eastern Bank, Callaway Graphics. If you'd like to send a donation for DeeDee's Cry, you can do that by mail, or you can go to, let's see, you can go to the GoFundMe. And you can look up DeeDee's Cry and you'll see it, and send anything you'd like to send. We're gonna move on in our program. And Miss Brandy, if you'd like to introduce our next friend.
Sure. So the next story we're gonna hear, I think one of the things when we talk about mental health, when we talk about mental health while Black, and again, debunking this myth that it does not happen in our community, one of the things we hear often is that, what about our brothers? What are their stories? What's the pain they're going through? Because there's such a culture of, if you are a young Black man, you just need to toughen up and deal, because life is going to be hard. And that's just what it is. But what if you are struggling as you are coming up into this world, as you are looking around? Where is that hope and healing for you? Who do you talk to when you're constantly told, be a man, buck up, this happens? And so we'll hear from Carlos next and his story, which I feel is so powerful, because he speaks to the fact that Black men feel pain too, and Black men need help and support too. So I'll turn it over to Carlos and have him share his story now.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to try to tell exactly what the doctor just described, but I'm going to try to make it as broad as possible. So it'll be definitely inspired by my life as a Black man, but I think it'll put it in perspective so that other people will see their own experience in it. And I would first start by saying that I think, my story starts well before I knew it started. If you're a Black person in general, but man or woman, you are born kind of with inherited stresses in your life. It could be poverty, it could be racism, it could be institutional racism, some of the things we talked about. It could be, in 7 billion stories on earth, it could be anything from an abusive household, or your household is limited in the tools that are going to be shown to you as a child. So I frame it that way because I think that as children, we're often taught how to take care of our physical body. Children are often, and it's usually the same, we're taught to brush our teeth, we're going to get 2 sets. They tell you that one's going to fall out, new ones are going to come in. There's a lot of similarities in how we are told to wash our face, wash our hands, take care of ourselves in the physical form. But we do not necessarily start to pay as much attention as how we treat and raise a culture around our young ones in a mental form. So the same way we carry a physical body for our entire life, we also carry a mental body for our entire lives. And those healths run concurrent, and they can often impact each other back and forth. Your physical health can impact your mental health, and your mental health can surely impact your physical health. So I think about it from the perspective as a Black man, and I think about some of the messages that get internalized early. And I think about one of the first ones that I hear, and I want to play a little bit about gender, because often as a boy, as the doctor alluded to, you're told to be tough. And that can be shown to you as early as when you're 4 or 5 years old, falling down and scraping your knee. And it could just be something that requires a little alcohol or peroxide, or it could be something that requires a Band-Aid, more than a boo-boo. But the reaction and how we treat the mental health around boys and girls starts to shape right there, and it's based on what we believe. And if we believe that men have to be tough, and that tough means that we have to suppress our feelings of pain, then it can begin to be planted in your head right there as a young man. And I say this because I remember scraping my knee, and I had an old school father who was born in 1936. I'm sure his father was less emotionally mature than he was, but still a great man, but just limited in his emotional tools. So when I fell, I got that tough love. Get up, shake it off, stop crying, go to your mother. You know, it was those things. And I say that to say that not just men teach men that, but women also teach men that. And these are things that we internalize as a Black man. So as a boy, we're taught I have to hold my pain inside. Otherwise, it might subject me to not looking tough. And if you think about what's shown to male culture, everything that's shown to us is about being tough. The size you are, the sports you play, you know, gladiator sports, and how we lift those men up on a pedestal. In the same regard, I'll speak to an old adage, and if we had a crowd audience, I'd ask everybody to raise their hand. So I'm just going to ask the panelists that I can see, and you can probably finish this. The women mature faster than men, right? As we all heard that, and you can keep your hand up if you believe it, right? And I believe it, and I'll keep my hand up because I believe it, because I believe that young girls are more inspired to talk about their feelings. So of course, when you see it 15 years later from the time you first fell down, that young girl or woman might have had a bit more opportunities to speak and understand her feelings, because you've taught the boys to suppress that. So that's something where we can actually affect the emotional maturity of the young boys and men around us as Black men by not putting them in the box of having to feel tough or strong by suppressing feelings. When in my life, in the negative, when I started to feel things of shame, if I was getting bad grades in school, didn't like who I was. By 15, your friends are pressuring you to lose your virginity. Your virginity becomes a bad thing. You know, you have the potential to be hypersexualized because of the messages you hear. And your behavior starts to shape around, it can be alcohol abuse. Some people turn to drug abuse. There's different addictions, and I don't want to just use drugs and alcohol as the popular two. Some people turn to food. Some people turn to just dangerous behavior. It could be gangs and things in the street, self-sabotaging themselves at work. And that goes on and on. I found myself in parts of that. And I remember my mother at 25, when I was 25, offered me therapy. And my first reaction as a Black man, what I had heard about therapy was, that's for crazy people. And no, I don't want no therapy. I don't need no therapy. This is like, I'm a Black man. I'm supposed to be resilient. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to fall down 7 times and get up 8. I'm supposed to be twice as better as everybody just to get a fair shot. And you've internalized these beliefs and think that you don't need therapy. So I continued on some of these paths, not knowing how to balance work. I think Neisha mentioned it earlier, knowing how to balance work or play, and not really having any boundaries. I was a youth worker at the time. I found myself taking on a lot of the pain and the hurt that some of the young people that I was working with would take on, whether that was their pain in their families or just, you know, struggles that they had. And I finally had gone through enough where I think I become a politician at the time, and I served on the mental health committee at the state level as a state representative. And the more stories I heard about mental health and the more I learned, the more I knew it was one of the most important things to treat a lot of the root ills in my community, especially around helping Black men. So since that, and continue on with my own personal therapy, it's been important to be able to share that message, to demystify it, to make sure that people don't think it's anything about, you know, being crazy, offering myself if people want to have one-on-one conversations, speaking about it on my podcast at stillrepping.com, or having people email me, because I really want to help break that myth. And I think the more people that tell their story, the more people talk about their feelings openly, and there's so many different feelings that we have that are similar that we just kind of take to ourselves. I think it helps, I think it helps us deal with our mental health. I think it helps us understand why we do the things we do, and then how to treat them. And I don't think we can do that on our own without the help of a professional sometimes. So I want to pause there. I know that once I get going, it starts coming out. So I didn't check for time or anything. But I just kind of wanted to frame it in that big box setting, to make it less about me and more just about, what we all feel and how we can deal with it in terms of impacting it not only in our own lives, but others, and being thoughtful about the culture we create.
Thank you, Carlos. Do you think, just to turn it back over to you, do you think you could talk about, because you talk a lot about, you know, therapy and, getting a therapist and what that experience was for you. Do you think you could talk a little bit more about that in terms of how that experience was for you, finding a therapist that you could connect with?
Sure. I would say the easiest metaphor is it's like dating. In the beginning, I had no idea what to expect, what I was going to get, anything about it, except that I was probably going to be sitting on someone's couch, much like I am now, right? You only kind of have what I saw on TV. So I got a couple of referrals from friends, and I would urge anybody that's listening that wants a referral. I think, DeeDee's Cry we have enough resources to be able to point you in the direction of some good licensed therapists. But I was told, and I tell this to other people, to look at it as dating, because you're trying to find someone who you can have a good ongoing relationship with. It's not a magic wand. It doesn't make your problems go away. It doesn't necessarily even give you, for me, it gave me the tools to work on myself. It wasn't that person was going to fix it for me. It was kind of the tools to understand that if I find myself being irritable, what can I do about it? It gave me the tools to understand if I was anxious, maybe I'm thinking about the future. And if I was depressed, maybe I'm thinking about pain from the past, and how I could center myself by doing practical things like taking deep breaths, physical fitness, having a support system of people I can call when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and anxious. It really gave me those things, but it took me 4 different therapists to get to someone that I have that kind of relationship with. So I had to be patient about it. I had to figure out which ones took the right insurance. Mass Health does a great job of covering some, and each therapist had a different style. Some are clinical and will talk to you in very kind of doctoral terms, but some are like your homeboy and your homegirl that you can sit for an hour and kick it with. I pay a $20 copay. So it's really like catching up with a unbiased person who doesn't know me to take my side, to tell me that their opinion. And as long as I am healthy, I'm not in a place where I'm threatening to hurt somebody else or hurt myself, everything is confidential. So it's like having a place to vent that's a safe place that can allow you to kind of get things off your chest, and again, kind of give you a mirror to look and say, well, what do you want to work on? And here's some steps to work on it if you choose. So I tell people to approach it with patience, and be clear about, telling somebody what you want, what you like. There's lists that have therapists of color, if people prefer that. You might prefer somebody of the same gender. But it might not be about that. It might be more about style. So that's what I would say in terms of people looking towards actually seeking help from a licensed professional.
Thank you, Carlos. And so just to kind of pull out 1 or 2 things that Carlos said that really, I think, resonates with those who might be listening or watching, is that it took him a while to get to the point where he felt comfortable with therapy and felt comfortable with opening those wounds and talking about those wounds. He mentions, at the age of 25, his mom saying, "Hey, son, I think you need to talk to someone." And even then, even knowing he was struggling, still having some hesitancy, still having some reticence to sit down and talk with someone. If you are listening, or someone else who may not be joining us but does need help, does need assistance, please understand that not everyone is going to be welcome to you saying, "Hey, talk to a therapist." We have to understand that people are on different ends of the spectrum. One end may be complete ignorance to this topic, like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with me, nothing's going on," to the other end of people saying, "I need a therapist, I need to talk to someone right now." While somebody in your life may need therapy, they have to be at a point where they are ready and willing to start the healing. and to start their journey. It is a difficult journey, and it takes bravery, it takes strength, it takes courage to say, I am broken, I am wounded, but I need support. I need help. Is there someone can help me? And there are resources we will share. There are hotlines that are available 24/7, whether that is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, whether that is the Trevor Project or the Massachusetts Samaritan's number as well. Carlos mentioned there's a listserv going out with numbers, information, websites about therapists of color if you prefer someone of color. So we will share all those resources with you as we go on. And so what I'd like to do is turn it over to James and have him share his story and share what helped him, what worked for him to find hope and healing.
Brandy, thank you for, first of all, I just wanted to say to Toy, thank you for this opportunity to host this. I know when Toy was talking about it happening that in person, that with COVID happened, I was like, let's take this to a virtual space. And so around COVID had the ability to start something called Java with Jimmy. And in that just said, Robin, why don't we do, Toy, why don't we do this here? So Toy, thanks for partnering and making sure that, or thanks for allowing us to serve you in DeeDee's Cry in this. So my story, as Neisha named, I guess it began at an early age, and it, I didn't realize that I didn't become aware about mental health until I was in a training 2-3 years in doing intensive adolescent services and tracking, sort of back in the day. For those of us that did youth work when it was DSS, we did intensive adolescent services, and we were required to go into trainings. And I'm sitting there and going to all these trainings, and one day I'm like, wait, that's not the young person that I'm working with, that's me. And so my mental health awareness peaked probably at about my late 20s. The journey began to kind of go backwards, if you would. After being aware, then I would kind of go and think about my childhood and think about things. And, as Neisha at an early age, my introduction, I guess, following the model in the context that you introduced it, my introduction to something around the mental health space would be through molestation. I was molested at an early age and just got to, it was normalized. And, Dr. Brooks was talking about, sometimes in our culture and different things, but sometimes in our culture, there's the adage of what goes on in this house stays in this house. And where it was previously stated, different parts of our culture and growing up and experience limits us in the ability to, one, name that we're not okay, and two, to seek help. I was talking to a therapist the other day that was a guest, and she was talking, and we came up with this sort of summation that therapy is basically a conversation with someone who may have a different level of expertise or experiences and knowledge that can talk with you to help you process around what's burdening you. And I was like, wow, a little bit long, but very simple. We make it so mystical. So anyway, my awareness of mental health happened then. And, with molestation and growing up without a father, there are some things in our community as Black men that are taboo, that we can't talk about, from just, toughen up, don't cry. I was, y'all know I'm transparent, whatever. I was, the little girly boy. I would jump rope or whatever. And growing up in the projects in Bromley Heath, you didn't do that. But again, in the time, I did not know. I just handled it. I dealt with it. And I think it was in those trainings and then in working in this and then working for a psychiatrist and becoming familiar with DSM-4 and now 5 and whatnot, I was able to sort of realize and pinpoint some things. And then to speed some things up, I guess one of the key areas that mental health is real for me is around trauma. That is a space that I move in. That is a space that me and one of the other guests have moved in to try to ensure that there is equity among services. And to be honest with you, a lot of times I've said to myself that the mental health stressor, yes, losing lives is a stressor, but it's sometimes the minutia that comes with it. So, when we're talking about my story, I was wondering how deep I would go, what I would talk about. And Toy said it was really in the moment. You never, she wanted to be raw and real. So I would really, if I was able to leave anything with you all about my story, is that despite some of the things that we go through dealing with depression, not knowing it, dealing with anxiety, not knowing it, not being able to name it, we want to be sure that we understand that it's okay to say we're not okay. Where the issue comes in at is when we don't address it. And there are different ways of addressing it. Reaching out to someone. I think Dr. Brooks said earlier about, kind of sitting with yourself. After that, sitting with yourself, are you reaching out to someone? Are you checking in with someone? So my story is inclusive of a lot, but I want to say one of the main things that the story is inclusive of is naming and embracing the things that I have dealt with in life and accepting them and not allowing them. Dr. Brooks, you preached when you talked about pouring out of the cup. And, I am just at a point now where I can exhale about the awareness of it, naming things, but then also getting to a point now where helping others understand that it's okay not to be okay. And you can reach out to someone and that there is help for you. And a lot of what was said tonight, I've been spending the past couple of weeks in a group called Man Cave. Shout out to the brothers that may be on from Man Cave. We've been doing it in a Zoom. And a lot of things that was said here tonight, they're dealing with. But ladies know that there are men talking. There are men that are working on their issues. And part of my story and our story is, again, accepting and embracing that we're not okay, naming it, but then not just remaining there, but reaching out to different folks in different arenas from therapy to address it. And that's a basic sort of summation of my story.
Thank you, James, for sharing and being brave enough to share some of the things that happened to you growing up. I do want to acknowledge right now, before I jump in and give some summation, some thoughts on what you just said, James, and remind everyone that, again, if you are struggling, if you need support, you need help, there are resources available on DeeDee's Cry. There are also 24/7 hotlines that you can chat with and also call if you need help and support. One of our panelists, our family, Neisha, has an organization, Pure Spark. She offers support and tidbits. Thanks, Neisha. She's putting up the number right now for Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK. But yeah, so there is support out there. And I also want to say, Neisha is going to be leaving us shortly. She has another engagement at 9. But if you do have some questions for her, again, she can be reached at Pure Spark on Facebook and Instagram. So you can ask her additional questions, ask for additional support, or any of us really tonight. You can reach out to us if you need additional support. One of the things that I heard in James' story and also in Carlos' story was this, recurring theme about trauma and the impact of trauma. And even you heard some strains of generational traumas, like where, this has been in my family for a while. Neisha mentioned, a relative that had died from suicide. Again, maybe not, it didn't have that much of an impact because she was younger when it happened. But you think about these traumas and you think about these things that stay in families for generations at a time. And this, this concept that James mentioned that, what goes on in this home stays in this home is real. And that is something that we as a community need to push back against, because if people are hurting, people are suffering and need support, we need to acknowledge that. We need to address that, because we don't want any of our young men and women or anyone, because suicide, mental health, depression impacts all ages, all races, all socioeconomic statuses. We don't want anyone to be suffering. We don't want anyone to be struggling. And particularly now, because we are in this interesting state right now with COVID, where some people's mental health and other challenges may be exacerbated. One of the things we know in suicide prevention is that isolation is huge, or feeling isolated, right? And so right now, we are being asked to isolate, socially distance, right? And so we have to think about these things and think about the impact on our community, because some of the things we've talked about with regards to loss of job, unemployment, poverty, discrimination, racism, these are things that disproportionately impact our communities. And on top of that, now we have COVID and all the impacts of COVID-19. And so this conversation is so important to be had. Having these talks, having these open, honest discussions need to continue to occur. We need to, as a community, like James said, embrace our wounds, embrace these traumas, and really start to address them as a community. And so what I'll do now is I want to turn it over to Toy, who brought all of us together and really is kind of the glue to why we've been doing these events now, this being our third or fourth, the first one virtual. And I'd like for her to share her story and talk about some of the things that led her to creating DeeDee's Cry, and also just getting help for herself and for her community. So Toy?
Okay. Hi again, everyone. My name is Toy Burton, and I am the founder and executive director of DeeDee's Cry Suicide Prevention and Family Support. If you wasn't with us in the beginning, DeeDee's Cry is named after my sister, Denita Shayne Morris, who died by suicide when she was 23 in 1986. So when DeeDee died, I was 19 years old, and I had just started drinking. I was in Montreal and somebody said, here, try this. And I tried it. It was Bacardi and I loved it. And my sister died 3 months later. So when she died, I just totally lost it, because she was my big sister. She was 4 years older than me, and she was somebody who I wanted to be. I wanted to draw like her. I wanted to write poems like her. To me, she was just really smart, and she was just somebody who made me feel like I was really smart. So when she died, I took it really hard. I took it really hard. I was really angry. I didn't want to be angry at her. I was angry at God. I cursed out God for taking her away. I was angry at God. And so when that happened, I just started to drink more. And I was a teen mom. I had my first daughter when I was 15 and my second daughter when I was 16. So, 19, they were toddlers. And at first it was just drinking on the weekend, my friends coming over and us drinking. And then it became during the week. And by the time I was 22, I started using crack. And by the time I was 25, I had my own suicide attempt. Because what I was really doing, instead of feeling, I didn't want to feel the pain that I was feeling. So I was drinking and using drugs to numb that pain. And so when I was 25, I was home alone. I went to my bathroom, went under my bathroom sink, and I took disinfectant to try to take my life. Okay? Disinfectant is not good to take. So that's what I did. I took bleach, Comet, whatever was under my bathroom sink. I poured it all in a cup and I drank it. And once I started feeling the effects, I realized that I didn't want to die. So I managed to make it down to the neighbor's house. I told them what I did. They called an ambulance, got me to the hospital, and they pumped my stomach. And after they pumped my stomach and I was okay, they sent me home. And that's all they did. They sent me home. There was no follow-up. I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't have a therapist. And I continued to drink. I continued to drink and do drugs. And as time went on, instead of feeling the pain, I didn't want to feel the internal pain. So I would inflict physical pain on myself. I would take razor blades, knives, and just make little incisions. I didn't find out later it was called being a cutter. So I was a cutter and nobody knew I was a cutter because the incisions were small, but it helped me not to feel the emotional pain that I was feeling. And it wasn't until, well, in 1991, I went into a program because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to drink anymore. And I went into a program and I stayed clean for 4 years because I did what I known to do to stay clean, which was go to meetings, which was talking at meetings. And I don't like talking. Like right now, my body's shaking, my voice is shaking, but I know when I speak and when we share our stories, we are helping other people. Because sometimes people think that they're the only ones going through it, and so they keep it inside. But when they find out that other people are going through it, or feeling depressed, or feeling like they want to die, it makes it easier for them to talk to somebody and for them to seek help. So when I'm going to fast forward, I want to say it was 2015 that I was crying in public spaces, and I didn't know why I was crying. But I knew there wasn't any reason for me to be sad. Like just all of a sudden, like just tears would just start flowing. And I'm like, why am I crying? Like nothing happened. Why am I sad? Like I felt like something should have been happening to make me sad, not knowing that you can feel sad without something happening. And I asked my primary care if I can speak to someone, that I need to talk to someone. And the first person that I was with, I didn't like her. And so, of course, I asked for someone else and I got someone else. And me and her did hit it off. And I saw her, I want to say twice a week. Like I said, she just listened. She wasn't, I didn't have to worry about what I was saying to her being twisted and going on to somebody else. It was totally confidential. I felt comfortable and it helped. It helped. So with these talks with Mental Health While Black, that was it. It's like people need to share our stories. People need to know that it is okay to talk. Because the more that we share our stories, the more that we chip away at the stigma that surrounds mental health in communities of color. So with me starting DeeDee's Cry, it was to uplift and to elevate the conversation of mental health, and just to make sure that resources about mental health and suicide prevention are accessible to communities of color. And I do want to make a correction. Robin, the address for 2 John Eliot Square is the address for DeeDee's Cry, not the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. So if you want to support DeeDee's Cry by check, the check is made out to the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. Please put DeeDee's Cry on it in the memo section, and you can mail it to DeeDee's Cry at 2 John Eliot Square, 2C, Roxbury, Mass. 02119. Brandy?
Thank you, Toy, for sharing your story. There's so many things we can learn in it. I think one of the things that I hear from your story that I think are important to highlight are the things that helped you when you were finding your own healing and your own hope. One of the things you mentioned was, having family, friends, support you, but also you began to help yourself by helping others and wanting to make sure that your sister's life and her untimely death was not in vain. And you wanted to make sure that other families, other individuals within our community received the support that you felt you didn't get. And so that's important when we're talking about this, when we're talking about, the struggles. One thing that's also important is to talk about the resilience, to talk about seeing the light and getting to the other side of our pain and our wounds. And so, while we mentioned in all the stories, you could hear some of the risk factors, some of the warning signs. You could hear, substance use and abuse. You can hear stressors. You can hear loss. You can hear sexual abuse. You can hear, strands of racism, poverty, all those things. And then you heard, thoughts of wanting to die, the warning signs, thoughts of wanting to die, making attempts, and all those things. But at the same time, we must focus too on what are the ways that we can continue to support ourselves and to support each other. What are those things that keep us going, particularly now because we're all socially distant? What are the things that get you waking up in the morning, maybe even putting on some clothes and getting on that Zoom call with video and not muted? What are those things that keep you going, that keep you feeling connected, that give you that spark, if you will? And so we have to remember those things, and we have to stay mindful of those things and the people that support us and continue to support us. And again, you heard from, several of the panelists, reaching out to therapy. And if that is something you want to do and you can do and you feel strong enough to do, because you have to be in a space to receive any messages, then please reach out. Please do. And I understand in our community, when it comes to therapy and when it comes to thinking about therapists, there is that, myth. Oh, nope, I ain't crazy. I don't need that. But if you're struggling, you need something, and whatever you are doing is not working. So maybe therapy is an option. Therapy is not for everyone, but it may be for you or someone you love. And so think about these things and think about the things that the panelists have said this evening in regards to what helped them find hope and healing. And again, every day is a day towards hope and healing. Don't think that, we all don't still struggle and we all still don't deal with our wounds, because we do. We've just found ways to deal with them better. And so I'll turn it back over to Robin now and see if there are any questions that have come in, any comments, or if any of the panelists have any additional thoughts or comments they'd like to share. I'll just turn it over now.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Thank you, Toy, for your story. Thank you, everyone. Neisha's still here. Thank you. You're not really here, or you are here?
Yeah, she's here, looking fabulous.
So I was trying to figure out how to see questions, and I still haven't quite figured it out. But
So I have one. I do have
okay.
one question.
Good.
Do we practice self-care? If so, why is it important to do so? So I'll just say yes. For me, yes, I practice self-care, and it's important to do so, because if you don't, you will deal with some things. Things will be bottled up, and if you don't get them out, self-care offers an opportunity to take care of yourself. And one example for me is seafood, walking by the water, or and for me today, I shaved. Brandy and Toy, remember, I shaved, and yeah, so not grizzly no more.
Very nice. Does anyone else want to chime in?
I'll share. One of my favorite self-care activities is practicing boundaries. You know, we only have a certain amount of energy, right? There's only 24 hours in a day, and you can only do so much. So actually, I think it was like 2 days ago, I was tired. You know, I don't know about anyone else, but I've been, you know, extremely busy during quarantine. And, you know, I think I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do, but even though it's something I love, I can still get burnt out from doing it, you know? And now that I'm aware of those warning signs, right? And they can be very small. I think sometimes I could be like a little bit irritable or a little short with people. I'm like, ooh, boundary, right? Like, maybe I need to cancel that meeting, and I need to have some rest, because if I don't do that self-care activity, I'm going to be burnt out, and no one wants to deal with the burnt out Neisha. Like, it's not. So it's for me, but it's also for my relationships as well.
Thank you, Neisha.
I'll just jump in here and just say, I truly believe that practicing self-care is also practicing self-love, because you have to invest in self before you can invest in others or anything, really. I mean, because again, you know, going back to the analogy of the cup, if your cup is empty, how you gonna offer anybody else something to drink, right? Like, you have nothing yourself to give. And so for me, self-care is something I regard and practice like almost maniacally, because it's so important to my own mental, physical, spiritual well-being. And so what I've been practicing lately, being, you know, quarantined and stuff like that, is I still try to get out, go on walks, enjoy some, you know, vitamin D, get some sunlight, get all those things going. And another thing I've started to do, which also mirrors what Neisha was saying, is practicing boundaries, because I think initially when, you know, COVID happened and we were at home, you know, my work schedule became crazy. And the hours that I was putting into it were crazy, because I was at home. Why can't I check this email at midnight? You know, and so I think doing that has definitely helped me in terms of being able to deal with, you know, being quarantined and having to practice social distancing. And another thing which has helped recently is sometimes I can be muted on a call, or, you know what, video, yep, nope, not today. Like, And that's part of my self-care is no video and I'm on mute because, yep, that's just how today is. And that's just how I woke up today. I woke up like this, right? So yeah, that's part of my self-care.
Carlos?
Sure. So just, I mean, I think, I think that other panelists have done it, all other friends and family have done a great job of breaking down self-care. I kind of wanted to point out something that I thought of that I wanted to mention earlier around those same lines. As a Black man, and I can only imagine, when I use my imagination, I have a very vivid imagination. The only thing I can think of tougher than being a Black man, based on all the things that we mentioned, was as being possibly a Black person that's homosexual, or a Black woman, or a combination of Black woman that's also homosexual, because of those same burdens that we carry. So I want people to think about, when self-care also, I think, includes pointing out and making note of all the slights that you might take for granted because it seems like culture. So when I talk to Black men, I think about how many times we've been pulled over for driving while Black, how many times we've had a police officer's gun stuck in our face, how many times we've been teased for being who we are or who we wanted to be and shied us away from being who we are. And so as people talk about boundaries and kind of conditions, I think it's important, if it was a physical pain, we automatically have a physical reaction. Someone pinches you, pokes you, burns you, something hot, you say ouch, and you record that and you move away from it immediately. And I don't think we always do that. The self-care, the permission to take care of yourself, is to move away from that emotional pain when you feel that, whether it's a conversation with peers, whether it's correcting someone's behavior. Because contrary to popular belief, at least for me, I don't believe love is unconditional. I believe that, and depending on your faith, you might feel differently. But even when I read certain good books, there are conditions on finding love, and that's kind of obeying certain rules and following certain practices. So for me, self-care, and this is only something I learned through therapy, is that I have a very active mind that can take me into the past, pains and slights of the past. Anyone that wronged me from a year ago to 10, I can remember what was said, or I can have anxiety about the future. To find peace, I'll do things that require my mental focus, like read a book, go for a bike ride, something that engages most of my body so that my mind can't wander. At times I used to, in my younger years, it might have been a bottle of liquor to suppress those thoughts, or going to a party so you can lose yourself in a crowd. But you want these distractions to be healthy and not necessarily unhealthy. So I find those things that focus my mind in a positive way to be my form of self-care that really focuses me and grounds me in the present and not the past or the future. So that's my self-care, and I think we could pass that and share that around to other people too, whatever works for them. Thank you, Toy, for putting this together too. May is Mental Health Month, so this is right on time as usual.
Any further comments, Dr. Brooks?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I think Carlos, even though, I think he took us to church right there with that comment. I think we need to pass the collection plate, collect some donations from all those listening. But I guess the one thing I will say kind of in summary is self-care is important. Taking care of yourself is important. If you wandered onto this meeting tonight, and you need support, or someone needs support, please reach out on your behalf, reach out on their behalf, because we are a community and we need each other when it comes to these issues and when it comes to finding support and healing for our community, in whatever form that comes for you, through therapy, bike riding, music, helping others. Let's continue to support each other. Let's continue to have the conversation, and let's continue to find our own healing and our own journey to hope. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who is listening, watching. Thank you, James. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Neisha. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Toy, for being kind of the ringleader of our circus and putting this all together. And that's it. That's all I have.
Well, again, I just want to thank each one of you for sharing your stories to help other people. We'll never know how much we could have saved a life tonight. And I think of that every time I tell my story, because I hear stories and sometimes that story saved my life, you know? So again, thank you so much for spending your time, sharing yourselves, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you know that it is okay to talk. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, James, our digital director. Thank you, Neisha. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Brandy, Dr. Brandy Brooks. And I want to thank the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute for your support. There would be no DeeDee's Cry without the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. I want to thank Eastern Bank for supporting DeeDee's Cry, and definitely want to thank the mayor of Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh, for opening us up. May is Mental Health Month, Awareness Month. Like I said, I don't like talking, but Robin, please close us out. Oh, wait, I need to add one other thing because I really
like talking. She don't like talking.
I
I
know.
got one announcement, Toy.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I've been clean for over 21 years because I kind of just left my story there. So I need to tell people that I did get clean and sober. I spoke to God, asked him to take it away from me, and that's how I've been clean. I ask him to take it away from me when I wake up. And once I make it through the day, I say thank you. And now it's almost 22 years later. And I don't feel like dying today, you know? I have hope, I have dreams, I'm planning. Life is awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Toy. So I just wanted to say, like Dr. Brooks said, tonight we heard a lot of stories. I hope people don't think that those stories are what define the folks who told the stories, because there's so much more to every single one of you. And thank you so much for being here now. Like you said, you hear other people's stories, you want to share your stories. Maybe it'll save someone's life, but it's actually saving your life by telling your story. So we thank you. I thank you. And I'm glad we had this time to have hope and healing together as a family, not as panelists. And we'll be doing it again, maybe virtually again. And actually, Toy, do you know if, so the parade was originally planned for the future. Will it be a virtual parade? Do we know?
Some things will be virtual, but the parade itself will be socially distanced. So the parade she's talking about, I'm also the founder and executive director of the Roxbury Unity Parade. And Roxbury is a neighborhood in Boston, which is predominantly Black and, well, people of color, predominantly people of color. And I really don't feel that we should cancel the parade at this time. So the parade, you can register to be in the parade. Only those who are registered will be allowed to be in the procession. But yeah, we're gonna still going on July 19th.
Okay.
And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
and the parade will be cars only, because again, we want to practice social distancing guidelines and, you know, city and national guidelines. So the procession will be in your vehicle, and we will process down the parade route, and then you will go home. We will say thank you, so because we want to continue the parade, we want to continue to celebrate our community, but we want to do so safely.
And if you want to get the full details, scroll down or look up Java with Jimmy. Toy did a full interview yesterday about that with the details. So just one other announcement. Some folks sidebarred and said, what's the man cave? If you want information about the man cave, email james@driveboston.org, james@driveboston.org, and we can get you information about the man cave.
Neisha, tell people how they can get in touch with Pure Spark.
Yeah, so Pure Spark is on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So they can feel free to check and scroll and see all the different coping mechanisms and psycho-educational posts that we have there, and also reach out.
Yes, and DeeDee's Cry is on Facebook, Instagram, at DeeDee's Cry. We have a DeeDee's Cry group, which is called DeeDee's Cry Group. And we have a group like this that meets on Mondays at 6 o'clock. If you would like to be a part of that, just email deedescry@yahoo.com.
And it's DeeDee's DeeDees Cry. Just wanted to also acknowledge those that were viewing tonight. Thank you all as family members on the other side of this screen. At some point we were up to, I believe, 38, 39 viewers. So thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you for sharing this post to others tonight. And I believe it's archived, so they'll be able to see, you'll be able to see this at a later date, right, Jimmy?
They can see it soon as it's over, and it'll be cast. We'll get the file to Toy Raw as well.
All right, so one more final thank yous to the sponsors: Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, Eastern Bank, Callaway Graphics for the flyer. If you'd like to send a donation to DeeDee's Cry, you can do that through the GoFundMe, and it's listed under DeeDee's Cry. You could also mail a check with DeeDee's Cry in the memo and mail it to the attention of DeeDee's Cry to John Elliott Square, number 2C, Roxbury, Mass. 02119. You can like us on Facebook, that's DeeDee's Cry, and also Instagram. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.